So I was looking at this recent Gallup poll, which is kind of reminded me of the basically sorry state of media today. The numbers, I have them right here. I mean, in 2020, there was an 18% confidence in television media, 24% confidence in newspapers, and by 2021, that's actually gone down to 16% and 21%. These are kind of some of the lowest numbers that have ever existed for media.
And I think that's just a national tragedy in so many ways, because the media is supposed to educate the American public about what's going on in its government.
Back in 2015, I remember kind of sitting in the Epoch Times newsroom and just being stunned at how similar the headlines would be across multiple media around something that was happening with the Trump campaign. The thing that I remember really distinctly is, I think it was perhaps Scott Adams that actually dubbed it the fine people hoax. When this whole, the Charlottesville tragedy happened, there was this narrative that came out that said that President Trump had said there were fine people on both sides, the protesters and the white supremacists.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because it's the best example of something that certain components of the media wanted to be true, and they intentionally chopped up the quote to make sure it met a media narrative end that they wanted to be true and turned out to be false.
That were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
It's incredible, because it's actually not even that long a clip. It's a pretty short statement where President Trump denounced the white supremacists unequivocally, and that just simply didn't appear in a lot of media coverage.
And if you remember, that line that President Trump, that false line that President Trump failed to denounce white supremacists, kept repeating itself over and over again over the years. It happened so much so that during one of the presidential debates, the moderator even continued the misinformation by stating, you did not denounce white supremacy then, will you do it now? That's literally what she said. It's totally false.
So I think today I want to kind of look at how the trust in the media has kind of really eroded over time. So why don't we just kind of look at some of these moments in recent media history? And of course, the major one is one that you were, a big part of, or a big part of exposing.
Right, the Russiagate hoax.
Right.
Many have called it the biggest political scandal since Watergate.
And this is one of these things where this wasn't just one story. Of course, there was the Steele dossier,
sure,
right? Which was a piece of opposition research. So, I keep thinking about this. We keep using these words, misinformation and disinformation, so casually. Maybe it's actually a good idea just to kind of mention what each one means.
Yeah, that would
right?
be very good.
So misinformation is sort of unintentional sharing of information, which isn't true. Disinformation would be intentional with some kind of political purpose, or what people call propaganda sometimes. So obviously the Steele dossier was a kind of, I guess, a textbook example of disinformation.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, it was the one thing that any journalist could have researched with very minimal resources and come to a factual conclusion that the credibility of that document was at least borderline suspect. But it was propped up by so many in the media because it was used to savage then campaign of President Donald Trump.
Well, and in fact, this has kind of been a bit of a theme, right? There are still people in America today that believe that the candidate and then the president is some kind of Russian operative.
You have to pause and ask yourself, was the former president of the United States in 2016 a white supremacist? Was the president of the United States in 2016 a Russian operative? I mean, those two statements alone, if you believe either one of them or both of them, are offensive to almost every American, because that's not how this country was founded and that's not how this country votes. But the fact that the media was able to cavalier those two incidences and many more and project some sort of false truth to those statements and many others is what has caused the media's credibility to crater.
And this doesn't just focus on President Trump.
No.
Another one was, of course, the confirmation hearings of Justice Kavanaugh. Mm-hmm. He was savaged, to use your term, right, with all sorts of allegations that were unproven. And then as he was confirmed, it all just kind of disappeared and there was no more discussion about it. That's what I found to be so kind of bizarre.
Well, I think that's a great example of not just one where there was a character assassination on an American based upon false information, but there was also what I believe really ticked off a large portion of the American public was the hypocrisy of it all. Because this was during the time of the hashtag #MeToo movement, which was taking on sexual misconduct, and rightfully so. But if you were a Republican or a conservative and an appointee or seeking a position, one set of rules applied to your background investigation, whereas if you were a Democrat or a liberal or something else, a different set of standards applied to attacking your character. And the Kavanaugh hearings just highlighted both those situations.
To be fair, I think there were a number of prominent Democrats taken down in the Me Too movement. Al Franken is one that comes to my mind.
Yeah, you're right.
Off the top of my head, but just the sort of the scale and the ferocity, the immediate disappearance from limelight.
And I agree with you. The Kavanaugh process, the Kavanaugh hearings captured not just the attention of a nation, but almost a world, because it was President Trump's appointee to sit on the United States Supreme Court. And then once Justice Kavanaugh was confirmed, the media was often looking for its next narrative, its next misinformation, disinformation piece that they could talk about.
Because this is the thing that really strikes me. And if these journalists, really believed that Kavanaugh did these things and was actually confirmed, despite them, you would think there would be a lot of more work being done to try to unearth these realities, because it would be such a terrible travesty of justice if that were true.
And if any candidate for any appointed office had committed the crimes, the allegations that they were saying Justice Kavanaugh committed, I know I wouldn't want them to hold that appointment, and I'm sure almost every single other American wouldn't. What Americans found to be a total miscarriage of justice is the two systems of justice that were sort of set up for Kavanaugh, and then the other one for everybody else if you weren't a Trump appointee for a high-level office position. The headlines that were driven from these media cycles, be it that Trump is a white supremacist or Brett Kavanaugh is a gang rapist, those headlines are forever. And many people don't dive behind those headlines and stay with the story to see what was actually uncovered. And in just these two instances, those two were proven to be totally false, but there's a significant portion of the American public and the world for that matter that don't know what the actual reality is because they haven't gotten past the headline.